Episode 3 of Chronicles of Critiquing, where we're going to take a look at the Mobile Suit Gundam compilation movie 2, Soldiers of Sorrow. This movie just came out on Netflix today, so I thought it might be interesting to do another watch. I watched the Blu-ray, but I believe it's the same version, the special edition version that came out in 2000, which was digitally remastered, and the audio was redone. And I double-checked on Netflix this morning, and the version that they have there is the Japanese with English subs. There was a English dub that came out many years ago, but it was for the original 1981 version, not the remastered version. So it seems like that dub, might be lost to time, unfortunately. But we're going to start off with kind of like a brief plot summary. This is going to be a spoiler review. I won't spoil the future movies, but obviously talk about what happened in the first movie and the second movie. Then we'll go over little pros and cons and kind of like a final review. So let's start off kind of what happened. So the first half, so it's a 2-hour and 20-minute movie. The first half of the movie basically deals with where we left off in the first movie, which is the White Base's fights with Ramba Ral. They have some skirmishes. Amuro leaves the White Base, kind of decides to abandon them, and he winds up meeting Ramba Ral and his troops. And they almost have dinner together, but it is spoiled by Frabo, who comes looking for him. They leave, and then Ramba Ral kind of follows them, attacks the White Base. All of his suits get destroyed, so they have to do kind of like a guerrilla warfare where they try to take over the White Base on foot. And at that point, all of his troops and Ramba Ral is kind of left by himself. He opens up a grenade, jumps out the window, and blows up in the Gundam's hand. In sort of a very elaborate death. After that, we get a brief synopsis of Operation Odessa, which is when the Earth Federation attacked a mining area run by this guy Makabe. We kind of learn very, very little about him. He just seems sort of very conceited. He's into his kind of rare vases and his collectibles. Seems kind of very far removed from the front lines. He does not care really about his troops. One of his officers says something like, "Oh, you don't really understand. You've never fought in battle." So he kind of seems to imply that he's kind of commanding from behind the scenes. And then we see at the very end of Operation Odessa that he is escaping into space. After that, the White Base goes to Belfast, where they stop. Where I guess they stop to get supplies or something like that. And they run into a Zeon spy who is working for Char, who we hadn't seen since the death of Garma in the first movie, had sort of got demoted and is now working for Cassilia. Zabi, who's another member of the Zabi family. And actually, that might help to take a second to sort of talk about that. So there's a number of children in the Zabi family: Girin, Garma, Cassilia, and Dozel. And we they never explicitly say it in this movie, but we sort of understand that there's maybe a little bit of a feud between the different family members, because you see people saying, "Oh, well, X person is, reports to Dozel and I report to Cassilia, so I don't need to help them out." So we see there's a little bit of maybe unrest going on in the Zabi family, but really only sort of hinted at. Anyways, so after Belfast, they head right for Jabro. So the White Base lands at Jabro. At that point, they finally get to kind of meet the Federation, brass for the first time. They're given their sort of official ranking, since most of the members of the White Base were civilians at the time that they kind of boarded and became de facto members of the military. They're given their new orders to go into space, and then Char launches a sneak attack on the base. They plant a bunch of bombs to blow up mobile suits, which is... that plot is spoiled, and then the White Base carries out their orders and goes into space, and we learn that at this point the Federation seems to think that the White Base is more trouble than they're worth. They don't really believe that they're new types, and they basically create them to be a decoy unit so that they kind of keep Char and some of the other Zeons busy while the Federation can carry out the missions that they think are going to be more important. So there's a lot of I really like this movie. I'll kind of get into that, but there are a bunch of highlights that I kind of wrote down, just things that I thought were really fun and really interesting. I think the first one is kind of how the movie ends. It ends on this like super upbeat song that's kind of catchy, but if you read the lyrics, and hopefully the next Netflix version will have the same version of the subs with the lyrics. And the lyrics are all about just basically going out to war and die. And I thought that it kind of was that contrast sort of reflected what had sort of happened to the white base in this movie, whereas, the people who have survived became closer, but a lot of people died. And a lot of people died, protecting the people that they love and care about. And even the white base is, the crew of the white base is celebrating at the end of the movie because they get to keep the children on board. Like they're these like 3 or 4 year old kids, and they're like, the Federation's like, oh, these guys should go to like daycare center and stuff like that. And they're like, no, they should fight on this ship. Like they've seen some stuff that you haven't seen, so they should stay here. So you kind of see that same contrast where it's like you can kind of tell that the crew of the white base is probably psychologically pretty messed up at this point. That was something interesting to note. There was also kind of this funny scene where the Zeons, so there's these like 3 or 4 like little kids. Actually, there's these 3 little kids, and most of the time they're just running around in the background. But they get caught they run away from the crew of the white base because they don't want to have to leave the ship. And then they get captured by the Zeons and tied up while the Zeons are... So the Zeons had broken into the Jaburo, and they find... They're not actually named in the movie, but the GMs, which are the mass production Gundams. So they try to like blow them all up, and they tie these kids up to kind of die as well. So the kids untie themselves, they get all the bombs, and they've somehow like commandeered a car, and they're driving away. And Amuro and the crew like runs into them. They're like, "Hey, what are you kids doing driving a car?" They're like, "Oh, we got all these bombs in the back." And they're like, "What are you talking about?" It was a little bit of a weird scene in the movie because the movie is mostly taken pretty seriously, and then you have this like completely ridiculous scene with like kids disarming bombs. But I did get a few laughs at it, and again, it still kind of shows this, just like the crew of the white base, their understanding of like what is normal is just so skewed because there's a bunch of teenagers who were just kind of thrown into this war that they had not planned to be a part of. Some other kind of things that I thought were interesting from the movie. Amuro is really a big jerk in this movie. Frabo, who's like, not quite his girlfriend, but a girl who clearly likes him and had been taking care of him and feeding him. And basically at the beginning of the movie, he's like, hey, you got to evacuate. She picks his clothes out for him. And Amuro basically just ignores her now. And Amuro sees like Miss Matilda, who is, they don't say how old she is, but, probably some like, early 20s, kind of woman, and Amuro sees her, and he's like all about her and could care less about Frabo. Another part of the movie I really liked, they do a barrel roll at one point. Rambaral, his goof, had jumped on top of the ship and is attacking it, so they kind of try to shake him off. So the reason I like this scene so much is it's actually referenced in a later Gundam, and when I watched that other Gundam, I didn't get the reference, but they made a really big deal about it in the... When they reference it, they're like, everyone strap in, like, we're going to do a barrel roll. And they're like, you're crazy, this barrel roll's, like, definitely not going to work. They're like, no, it will. So, and so at the time when I watched it, I was like, this has got to be referencing something, but I don't know what it's referencing. So it was cool that I finally got the reference. I just didn't remember it from the first time I watched Mobile Suit Gundam. Another thing, this movie had a lot of deaths. It's called Soldiers of Sorrow for a reason. We had... Matilda died, Haman died, Ramba died, Lieutenant Woody died, Ryu died, Miharu died. So you had, those weren't like main characters, not like Amuro or Bright Noah level, but there are some pretty, say minor to major characters there, main crew members of the white base, who did die. So I think that was good, just, not just like a super happy ending for everybody. Still keeping up on the people getting punched count, so I had 4 in this movie and 2 dodges. At one point, Amuro dodges one of the superior officers punching him, and he's like, oh, you don't get to dodge me, you gotta stand still while I punch you, and then he punched him again. Another thing I thought was kind of funny is Sila Mas is kind of a jerk to this prisoner, so they catch this prisoner from that's on Rambaral's team, and Sila is kind of asking him about Char and who he is, trying to figure out what's going on with them. Also in this movie, we're kind of finally explicitly told that Sila's name is Artesia, and her brother is Shar, and his real name is Casval, and we know that somehow they are involved with Ramba Ral. They don't quite say what their relationship is, just that all of them have a history together. But so Sila's there, and then the prisoner guy escapes, and he's like, "Hey, you want to come with me? I know you're Zeon." And she's like, "No, I'm just going to rat you out." And she's like, "This guy's trying to escape." So they chase after him, and he gets into the airlock and locks the door. And she's like trying to blow to shoot the knob with her gun. And he's like, that's not going to work. So this other guy just shows up with like a rocket launcher and just like blows him up point blank, and he just dies. And I thought it was like just a little overkill in the most literal sense. So yeah, that's sort of my kind of the plot of the movie and sort of some highlights. While we're kind of talking about highlights, just right in front of me here, I have two figures. I have the Goof, which was the suit that Ramba Ral used, and we also have the Dom, which was used by a number of people. Kind of most notably the Black Tri-Stars. That there's a scene where there's like these three guys that are fighting Amuro, and they do the jet stream attack. They're not explicitly called the Black Tri-Stars in the movie. They are in the TV show. Probably just something that got cut out and they didn't realize it. What's also actually kind of interesting, which the movie doesn't go into, probably because it wasn't kind of Gundam lore at the time, but has later been established in some of the side media, is that the Goof was the follow-up mass production suit after the Zaku, but it had a greiter performance over the Zaku, which they did mention in the movie, but I guess it wasn't kind of worth the cost benefit, so they moved to the Dom. So Zeon did deploy a bunch of Goofs, but not too many, and we kind of see that in the movie where there's a few Goofs, but they kind of move on to the Doms as their mass production suit. And I got the Robot Spirits versions of these. I have not unboxed them yet, so I just sort of have them here, but keep your eye out. We'll definitely be doing these in a later unboxing. So pros of the movie. I talked about some of the things that I really liked about the movie, and just some things that maybe I'll officially count as pros. I loved seeing Amuro sort of studying and preparing for the battle after he kind of has his first fight with Ramba Ral. He is trying to do some computer simulations and figure out how much better the Goof is, and he's sort of doing some studying. And I do like seeing that. I understand he's supposed to be like an ace pilot, and he's a new type, which they don't exactly explain what it is, but they're saying, oh, well, he was able to just sort of pick up the Gundam and use it. And I understand that. I know they're trying to build them up as this like super special, guy, great intuition, but it still kind of bothers me when someone just jumps into Gundam for the first time, they're the best pilot ever, and they never practice again, and they just get better. And I guess also just a brief discussion of new types. This movie, the first movie mentioned new types sort of in passing once or twice. This movie really heavily emphasizes the new type. They're trying to kind of figure out what it is. I don't want to get too much into details because that might spoil what's going to happen in the third movie, which, if it's anything like the TV show, will heavily emphasize new types. But kind of right now, you can kind of see there's sort of two contrasting versions of it. You sort of have the more philosophical new type, which is supposed to be someone who is evolving to deal with kind of living in space and also being able to sort of interact and communicate with people better. And then there's sort of how the military is interpreting new types, which is just to be like an ace pilot that is, super powerful. And that's definitely an issue that you're going to see continued on in Mobile Suit Gundam and lots of other Gundams. This movie also notably had the first sort of new type flash. You see it, Amuro does it twice. One time, again, you just see kind of this little flash where he, kind of realizes something, intuits something. And then later on, him and Char, when they're fighting, Amuro also gets the new type flash as well. Another thing that I really liked about the movie is that I felt like it humanized the Zeon warriors a little bit. In the first movie, they're sort of just like mustache-twirling villains. Even Char is mostly like a mustache-twirling villain for the first 9/10 of the movie, of the first movie. In the second movie, the Zeons are overwhelmingly portrayed as just like evil war villains, but you do get that scene with Ramba Ral where they go to the bar and they're ordering food and Amuro interacts with them, and it's kind of like, okay, some of these Zeon guys, they're kind of cool. They might be like normal guys if maybe we had met under different circumstances. You also see that Ramba Ral is taking on this dangerous mission so that he can get accolades and promotions for his troops, again, it's not just like this evil villain. These are like actually humans, and I think that Gundam is really at its best when it is, has two sides that both have pros and cons to them, and maybe one side is the protagonist and one side is the antagonist, but there's less of a defined good guy or bad guy. In this movie, there is a good guy and there is a bad guy. Enzion is the bad guys, and the Federation is mostly dealt with in a positive way. But I do like that we got that hint of it. I don't really have a lot of cons to this movie. I really enjoyed it. The only con, is they obviously had to make some cuts. The first half of the movie was, they kind of gave everything that had to do with Rambaral. They cut most of the Operation Odessa stuff. And I think they also cut a few skirmishes with Char in between, Belfast and getting to Jaburo. I think the cuts make sense. If you're going to focus on Makuve or you're going to focus on Rambaral, obviously you want to focus on Rambaral. But, again, maybe not as much information as if you watch the original series. And the other thing that I thought was kind of funny is because of the cuts, there was a bunch of flashbacks to things that we didn't see happen the first time. And again, that makes sense. If you're going to flashback to it, why bother putting it the first time? I just thought it was kind of funny. All in all, I really enjoyed the second Mobile Suit Gundam movie. I think it took everything from the first movie, built up on it, lots of new mobile suits, a lot of good sort of politicking, philosophizing, a lot of cool action, and I think it's really setting up. They're returning into space and getting ready for the final battle, and I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks so much for checking out this video. I don't do a lot of kind of anime critiques. I mostly do unboxings, so please feel free to check out some of the other videos. New unboxings go up every Wednesday, and actually next Wednesday we're going to be taking a look at this guy, this metal build Ava 01 test type. So please look forward to that. Thanks so much, and keep collecting.